to just add a little explainer that we did, weeks and months ago, we did actually invite an opposition panel. You know, wanted people to try and defend the government. And the result is here. I didn't say no more. No, I invited all of the Sussex MPs, Conservative ones, invited the Sussex NHS Health and Safety Trust. I invited all the local town councillors. No one. It speaks volumes, doesn't it? They can't defend the indefensible. Okay. I would now like to move to question and answer session, the most exciting part of the meeting. And I'd just like to read out one of the emails, many emails that I received. And this is from a lady called Susie. And she said that she would be attending tonight. You don't have to make yourself known if you're here, but if you do want to, obviously feel free to do so. Myself and my two daughters work frontline for the NHS. We have seen through the lies and the coercion, but feel vulnerable as we are in a minority amongst the staff who believe in the jabs. The threat is looming that we will be sacked the 2nd of February as we refuse the vaccine. We have vaccine control cards, exemption and pro-risk reforms. We're members for Workers for England Union. Have seen Anna and Buissieret's videos regarding asking for a risk assessment for the jab. I'm bank staff, so I guess they'll just refuse to give me shifts, so they don't need to have to sack me. Susie, are you here? Would you like to?
Yeah, she's here.
Wow. Would you like to say a few words? We can get a mic to you.
My frustration is that my family, two of my daughters work for the NHS and myself. My youngest daughter, she was a care worker, she was going to be sacked, so the whole family is in the care industry. So it's just a real threat for us. Luckily she's changing jobs, so she will not be in that situation. We are with Workers for England Union, they've been amazing for my youngest. Agree.
Let's hear it for the Workers Union. Well done.
Yeah.
Do you have a question for the panel?
I just wondered if there's anything we can do to. I watched Anna's video. It's very useful to sort of see. It was very useful to see Anna's video about what we have to do to stand up and ask for risk assessment, but I was just concerned from my point of view that being bank staff, they were just saying, sorry, there's no shifts for you. But this jab situation affects my whole family, so, it's very, very real.
Anna?
Hello. Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat, just the wrong way. Well, of course, we can't predict how an employer is going to respond in each particular case. But you're right. I am hearing that people who won't comply, let's put it that way, are being given back office jobs, or in the military, for example, they're being told they can't be deployed, etc. But ultimately, as I explained in the video, the employment contract cannot be unilaterally changed. And that would include changing your jobs unless they're going to pay you the same and give you the same conditions, and you consent to that. So if you agree that you don't mind going in the back office and for the same pay, and that means you don't have to be put through all of that stuff, then you could consent to that change if you wanted to. But the point being, they don't get to unilaterally impose these changes on you. And if they do, then obviously that's a breach of contract. That's a fundamental breach of contract. What employers cannot do is downgrade you or pay you less or put you under worse terms and conditions. And obviously if they do, as I've said to people, do not resign. At most, or rather at worst, you'd have to go to the employment tribunal, but that's where Neil and the wonderful Workers for Union, hopefully you wouldn't get that far, because of course what we're finding here is that employers will back down again if you take them to task, and as I say, that the individual risk assessment is key, because that focuses both the employee and the employer on what risks are actually going to happen here, and it is an individual risk because we're not all the same. So of course when employers get to that point, particularly if they do actually go ahead and give the risk assessment and then there's the occupational health report, you know, if you have a decent physician, they will be duty bound to say what the material risks of these things are, and then that in handwriting, you know, in written form in front of employers, line managers, etc., that often starts to change the narrative. So it may not go as far as losing your job. You know, so that's the other thing. The whole idea about these employment disputes is that you find the resolutions to them, and at the moment we're in the early stages of all of this, but you know that in other jurisdictions abroad, you know, these mandates have been ruled to be unlawful. Employees who have been put on sick leave have been, you know, been told that they can go back to work and then get their back pay paid back. So, you know, that's why I say to people, don't assume that this is all going to end up in the worst situation. We have got time to fight back and hopefully conciliate.
Thank you. Anything to add?
Yeah, just a brief addition to that. In fact, very few individual risk assessments have been done for the members that we're representing. Our first priority is to get in the medical exemption. We can't change the law, the employers themselves can't change the law, but the law does provide for exemptions. It has to because of the Equality Act. So medical exemptions is a way to put a brake on dismissal. Now, many workers say to me, but I'm pretty fit and healthy, or they've read about excessively stringent criteria for medical exemptions, but often they'll say, well, I don't really have a condition that I can claim. And I say, well, what's your reasons for not wanting to take the vaccine? And then everything they tell me is to do with their health, the risks to their health. So everyone has a medical exemption.
Yeah. Yeah. Religious exemptions, because obviously for those people who don't want, etc. And I personally, you know, believe in God, and I believe in my God-given immune system. So, you know, and ultimately, you simply have the right to say no, to refuse treatment, and that's set out in case law. You have the right to say no, even if it's going to kill you by saying no. So you don't actually have to give a reason. And part of this demanding exemptions, of course, is a breach of your, you know, privacy and confidential information. So whilst I agree there's medical exemption, the other exemption is no, I don't consent.
Thank you very much. Moving on, I can see an arm up in the back of the corner there. Roving reporter, can we get to him, please?
Can you hear me? Yeah. My name is Nigel Jensen. I'm working with the Together Declaration. We started all in that we've asked people who signed the declaration who work for the NHS if they would like to join an active support group. So far we've got about 1,200 NHS workers who want to help. We haven't broadcast the request, so maybe we can talk. What people are saying is that in your job as a nurse, you explain to patients why they may or may not want to have a treatment. And excuse me, it's absolutely disgusting that you have not been given that respect. Medical consent is your right to choose whether or not you have a vaccination. We haven't done the advice yet. I think it will be in the first instance if you have a union, ask your union rep what they're going to do. In the second instance, join the Workers of England Union, who we'll be talking to. I think if you have taken a decision not to be vaccinated, this doesn't change your decision, does it? So, and then hopefully we'll tell them to drop it.
Thank you for that. Any other questions, please? Put your arms up. Oh, brilliant. Yes, the lady there, please.
Particularly a question for David and Dr. McCrae. I know it seems not as important as what's been stuck into people's bodies at the moment, but I've posed this question to the UK column and several legal people. as to why no one is really picking up on the fact that behavioural insights is not a recognised profession in this country. So when these people are called to account, they won't be able to be prosecuted for being in the behavioural insights and psychology profession, because it's not a recognised profession in this country. So, and nobody seems to be really understanding how relevant that is.
Thanks for that. That's a very good point. It's not something that I'd thought of before, but I certainly think that everybody who's involved with trying to change our society in a way that we haven't consented to, or even without our knowledge, should be held to account for that. I don't know what law you would use to do that. Maybe that's something Anna could speak about more as a legal
dealings
expert.
with the police where they have raised this issue regarding a stalker who works in behavioural insights, that's his business. And they said even if it got to a court, because that's not a recognised profession in this country as it is in the United States, the fact that that was his job could not be taken into account in a court of law. That's what the police told me. So I'm just wondering.
The great lawyers that they are.
Well, yes. That's quite a major point. If that's then applying to behavioural insights or across the country and the world.
Yeah, no, I don't know where he's coming from that point of view, because firstly the behavioural insights team does include qualified psychologists, and they're regulated by the British Psychological Society, and they have a code of conduct which includes, conducting their practice ethically. And in fact, I don't know if you've all heard of Gary Sidley. He's a senior psychologist with HEART, the Health Advisory Research Team, and he and a group of psychologists wrote to the British Psychological Society some months ago, challenging the British Psychological Society and saying, why haven't you intervened with these people who are qualified and therefore regulated by you? And they've given very poor responses. In fact, I've got the detail in here, you can read it later, where they quote the methods and means of psychological warfare that's being conducted on the population and holding them to account, because it does breach the code of ethics that they're supposed to practice under. But in terms of the legal position, we're all equal under the rule of law, no one is above it. And we are all living men and women acting as whatever job we're doing. So regardless of what their job title is, those people on Spy B, that memo from the 22nd of March, which said 2020, which said we have to increase people's perception of fear, and they did. And now we have the figures to show how many people have committed suicide, and that 60% of our children are now suffering with mental health problems. They did a good job. Now, going back to the war conventions, as I say, means and methods of warfare are not unlimited. And one act of prohibited warfare is conducting a terror campaign. You don't get to conduct a terror campaign, again, even in wartime. So these people will be held individually liable in their personal capacity, civil and criminally liable for the damage they have caused from their strategy and their messaging and their advice. And they will be held to account. So I don't know where this police officer gets the idea that anybody cannot be prosecuted, because, as I say, every single person can be, and those who are perpetrating must be, because we must root out this, criminal behaviour from our society. We can't tolerate it. So, yeah, the police must run in my view.
Yeah, just a very quick addition to that. I think that the Nuremberg trials, which must happen, there should be a media section, including the bent opinion pollsters, a health professional section, including the care home managers, a police and criminal justice section, including both the thugs in uniform and their commanders, and a civil servant section, including the nudge unit, and finally, best of all, a
politician section.
There was the case, they tried the judges as well, and the lawyers, so, you know, none of us are left off. You know, in every profession there are perpetrators, aiders and abettors and complicit, so...
Right, lots of hands are going up, this is good, that's what we want to see. Gentleman in the first row, hand up. Just wait for the mic, we'll just, John. Thanks.
Why don't they just change things to the way that they want it? Why don't they just change things around the way they want things? And how can we stop that?
Well, if you're talking about politicians, they can make whatever laws they want to in Parliament. We need to get good people in Parliament. So, you know, as I say, I'm trying to do that, but this is like a marathon, not a sprint, and it's like climbing a mountain. But hopefully many of you will come join me as well and join in the fight to change the people that we've got in Parliament, because I think we need to sweep away the vast majority of those 650 that are there.
Well, David, I would say they can't make any laws, though, right? Because it has to be by consent, right? And it specifically says in the coronation oath that, you know, they uphold the laws as consented to. So these laws that are derogating from our rights and are actually criminally unlawful, just because they've made them in Parliament doesn't mean that they're law, right? Yeah. So that's something else to understand, because obviously Acts of Parliament get repealed, and also, as I say, if you don't consent, then it's not lawful. And a consent is being obtained unlawfully because of the psychological warfare. So the evidence from the experts that we're working with who have analysed the messaging being used, and for example the media content aimed at children, etc., and their expert opinion is not a single person in the country is capable of giving their freely informed consent due to the psychological operations that have been conducted upon them. Now that means that nobody is consenting lawfully. That's very serious.
Right, next question please. Yeah, the gentleman on the left please.
It seems very, very clear from listening to the panel that we have a serious problem going on at the moment. The question is how we're going to sort it out. It could be the legal route, and let's hope that that's one possible way. But in the end, surely it is going to be political, and we do need to clear out what we've got in Parliament and replace it with some worthy people like yourself, David. Thank you for doing what you're doing for us. However, you are one of, unfortunately, you are not the only independent party, and if we are to clear out the usual crowd, the Liberals, the Conservatives and Labour, do we not have to have a unified resistance to that, including yourself and maybe other notable characters such as Richard Tice, or do you think maybe he's also one of the system?
I get asked this question very, very often, and I don't want to say too much about the other parties and so on. What I would say is that no one was doing anything about this for the first 6 months of the situation. And then I set the Heritage Party up. I was working on this from the beginning and doing a lot of groundwork, and I set this up because I thought we needed something to challenge this, and there's nothing happening. But then just a couple of days after I launched the Heritage Party, then the Reclaim Party was launched, and then a few weeks later, then Richard Tice popped up and said, oh, we're going to reactivate the Brexit Party again, even though they'd sort of deactivated it for a long time. So, I mean, all I would say at the moment is it's disappointing that some other people didn't come and join me, but they set up their own things after me and then seem to copy what I'm saying, which happens. You know, the other day I started, you know, I used the phrase medical apartheid. Yes. I have done for a while, and then one of the other people there that you mentioned started
saying that just after I was saying it. So, you know, obviously I'm having an influence on them. But you know, I can't give you an answer at the moment that you might like to have, that we'd all sort of join one big party. I don't think that's where we're going, because you know, the Heritage Party, I mean, I'll give these out later, I mean, these are our leaflets and so on. We've got a full manifesto. I set us up actually to be a socially conservative party, but then freedom has become the biggest issue over the last 18 months. Of course, we're getting back our fundamental freedoms, which have never been taken away, because they're part of our heritage. The heritage we have from common law, which goes back centuries and centuries. But I think that there's some similarities with some other people, but there's some differences as well. What I'd say is we're a fully grassroots party. We're funded totally by members and small donors, whereas the other ones, some of them, you know, one of them has a big. All the finances are on the Electoral Commission's website. So, Reclaim got £1.5 million in donations in the first 6 months of this year from one person, Jeremy Hoskins, who's an ex-Tory donor. So that's how they're funded. Reform seems they had nearly £500,000 in loans from something called Tyson Investments Limited. It's all on the Electoral Commission's website, so that seems to be how they're funded. So we're funded in a different way, but we're building a grassroots party with members, trying to have local branches get together and actually be a real party, you know, in sort of true sense of the word. So we'll see how things go as time goes on, but you know, you can see North Shropshire, the by-election, Heritage Party standing, Reclaim is standing, Reform is standing, the Freedom Alliance is standing, all in the same by-election. So, you know, that doesn't make sense. But I hope, you know, that maybe people will come and join us in the Heritage Party. We'll see what happens. So, yeah.
Thanks, David. Right, next question. Yes, the lady there sitting down, just there.
Yeah, I wonder what we could all do en masse to try to make a difference more quickly. So, for example, the day after the announcement about the NHS mandating vaccines, I phoned the police, which I thought we should all be doing, to report a crime against humanity. I quoted the statute of Rome, etc. And they just said, oh, this isn't a police matter. And I said, yes, it is. They said, no, phone your local councillor. I said, I've already done that, they're not interested. And nor was the MP. And they said, no, it's definitely not a police matter. And I said, of course it is. And, you know, continued to talk about that, and took the person's name and number and said that I would be passing their name to the group of lawyers who were putting together the court cases against them, and that they would have to answer for this, that they were liable. But, you know, my idea was that we should all, you know, if, for example, we said on this day at this time, we all go to our local police station and queue up to make police reports about crimes against humanity, just because as we do all this, you know, they keep bringing things in, they're sneaking things in, and, you know, before we know it, they're already down to kids at age, you know, trying to be 5-year-old. You know, Boris met with the Prime Minister of Israel yesterday. Well, they're doing kids age 5. I'm sure they were discussing that. You know, as we go on trying to fight it, it's all being sneaked in, and it's all, we're not changing things quick enough to stop things before they get into a very, very dangerous level.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how many of you are aware that there were around 30,000 criminal complaints filed earlier in the year. I think that was through the Freedom Programme and Guardian's 300. So there was a mass campaign for that. The police rejected them all, saying that it was basically complaining about the politicians, so take it up with your politicians, which is a bit like a rape victim being told to go back to the rapist to try and sort it out.
Yeah.
So we did some more digging, and I've been working with Mark Sexton, the former policeman, and as you know, met with Sir Graham Brady and done some other investigation with a whole load of police who are whistleblowing, etc. And it seems to be that there is a unwritten policy not to accept any claims alleging such crimes throughout the force. Now, that's been confirmed through several sources, and loads of people have been trying to report them, including myself, at various places. The latest that we have on that is that there are some now police who are now waking up, and some of them have been helping communities serve the notices of liability. And indeed, I met a policeman last couple of weeks ago in Reading, and I said to him, you know that we're serving notices of liability, because the police forces have been served with notices of liability again months ago, in fact I think about a year ago. And his response was, good, they all need to wake up. So more of them are. Now the issue is that when Mark put his criminal complaint in, even though he put in 1,200 pages of evidence, personally when I looked at it, I could see why they might have said that wasn't enough. He felt that it was, because he was a policeman used to preparing those cases. What we now have on board is a policeman who, he's retired, and that's what he used to do, serious high-level criminal investigations. So he has the expertise to put together a packet of evidence that does meet the required standard. I'm pretty sure Mark did, but this guy's going to have another go. But yeah, things have moved on from then. More and more police have woken up, more of them have left. Apparently a lot of them are very, very unhappy, suffering with mental health problems, etc. themselves. So I think I agree. Everybody who knows that somebody has been injected without their informed consent or has been harmed in any other way that amounts to a criminal offence, then yes, we have a duty to report it. And if everybody was turning up regularly at the police and filming it and handing over evidence, there comes a point, doesn't there? Who knows when it will be, but we have to do that.
Thank you.
Anna, in one of your videos you mentioned police crime reference number.
Sorry, oh yes.
So if we know that number, can we give that to policemen that we know so that they can see what it's all about?
Yes, well, Mark Sexton was initially given, I think, 1 or 2 crime reference numbers and was promised that they would be followed up, but the outcome of that was to say, no, we're not going to do anything. I know a family, I don't know them personally, but I know a family has obtained a crime reference from their child dying, and I know that other families are trying to get crime references for similar offences. But you're right, if we have these if people are able to get crime references, then obviously we can piggyback on the back of the ones they are able to get hold of.
Do you have one? Do you have the one that you mentioned in the video?
That was that the one from Mark Sexton's? Did I mention whether? Well, it would either be the Mark Sexton crime reference, in which case I have, but as I say, they've chosen to close it, but we could try and get them to reopen it. I haven't got one from that
3 weeks ago in the video.
Yeah, that would have been the Mark Sexton ones and the crime reference numbers he gave me. But, we're working on this in terms of trying to either get that reopened, because they didn't do a proper investigation, or, as you say, flooding them with more until we can get some. But yeah, unfortunately, the intel is that their policy is not to accept these crimes.
Yeah. I'm sorry, just to finish off, the lady's question, because I think this might answer some other people's questions as well, is what can we all do to change this situation that we're in? And I'm sure most of you will have heard of the Stand in the Park group. Let's be honest, if you're still standing in the park, you're in the wrong place. You should be in your shopping centres. Stand in the Park is for wimps. We need to be out there in the high street. And I've been a member of a very, very successful local group. A couple of them are here tonight. The Carshalton Resistance, we're known as. And we're out on Carshalton High Street, suburbs of London, twice a week, Thursday evening, Sunday lunchtime, every single week. We've been there since the beginning of the year, and it's really making a difference. The amount of support from passing traffic is amazing, And I think a sign of the effect it's having is our local MP. We haven't heard a squeak from him for months. He knows we're onto him.
I think you make a very good point there, that it's all well and good having the large national demonstrations up in London, big crowds, that gets a message out there, but local engagement, we really need to focus on that now. Absolutely right. Okay, thank you for that. Right, next question. Yeah, please, gentlemen, just there.
First of all, I've got a question to you. Who's funding these people? And I'll have a follow-up question to that.
Please go and deal with that.
Well,
Some guns are mine.
hang on, I'll just read David Icke's book and I'll just try and find out. These people will never know.
No, exactly. The answer is different to what you think I'm asking.
Well, I hope you can enlighten us, but the public face of these crimes against humanity, these are not the people who are really running the show. And this has always been the way with this global cabal. And, well, David knows a lot about this.
Yeah, it's me. It's not really. I mean, I know as much as anybody else. We see the big people, we see the pharmaceutical companies, we see the foundations which have billions of pounds, but I think there's people behind that as well that you just don't, they're the people that you never see the front faces, you don't see the people with the real serious money. I mean, you think they got serious money, there are other people. But what I'd say on that is there's some people I talk to still think that this is just people messing up. This is just, a cock up, yeah. It's just people saving face. I mean, seriously, this is happening in lockstep all around the world, doing the same things at the same time. It's obviously coordinated by people, more people behind that too.
We're pointing at the puppets, aren't we?
Yeah, some of them are probably puppets, some of them maybe not, but certainly some of them are.
So my follow-up question or answer is us. We are funding them. And how are we doing that? How are we doing that? We are paying taxes. Why are we paying taxes? Are they legal?
No.
So anybody who's paying taxes needs to know why they're illegal. It's down to the second V, it's down to our straw man, it's about recognising who we are, and whenever a letter comes into your post box and you think it's to you, it's not addressed to you, it's addressed to a Mr. or a Ms. or a Mrs. And when we know, when we fully understand this, then we will lawfully be stopping our taxes, because that's what we should all do once we understand what it's all about. Would you agree?
Yes.
Are you referring to common law training?
No, I'm referring to Sector B. Sector B is the straw man. So we all believe when we have letters from the council saying please pay your taxes, Mr. Full Caps, they're not actually referring to you, the man, the living man. They're referring to the straw man, and that person is a person, and a person is a corporation. If you look in Black's Law, section issue 4, is that not true?
Yeah, that's absolutely right in terms of, our legal fiction and then us as a living, breathing human person. Yes, basically when you look at the fact that our taxes are meant to be for lawful purposes, in which case we're quite happy to pay them, to pave the road, to support whatever we need to do. But when it comes to our money being used for illegal, unlawful purposes...
You got it, yeah. So we're paying the councils, and they're spending the money on things that we're not happy with, we're funding those, then surely individually every single person in this room who's paying taxes can actually have an influence. And if that's the case, and you decide to stop your taxes, which I have, you're not in a war, you're just conditionally accepting, saying, please help me pay my taxes lawfully, I want you to help me, please can you answer these 3 simple questions? Of course they don't answer those, because they can't. And if they do, they won't put a signature in a working signature. So we all can make a very easy, okay, maybe fearful for some people, because they're good little boys and girls and they've been brought up in the right way. As I was, I like to do things properly, do what I'm told. The government says, pay your taxes. But now I realise that that if I do pay my taxes, I'm acting unlawfully, illegally.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, well brought up. I mean, you know, I'm obviously not going to sit here and advocate that nobody should pay their taxes. But, however, you are right. You know, in criminal law, of course, you know, you are either the main perpetrator or you are aiding and abetting or you're complicit. So if you know that your tax money is going off for illegal wars and you're happily paying it, then clearly, you know, you've got to ask yourself what you're doing there. Have to talk between the lines then. But hopefully you get the message.
Thank you. An excellent question, very important point you made. Thank you.
Priscilla's been waiting for ages. She has her hand up every time.
Oh, yes, Priscilla at the back, please. Let's go to the back of the room now.
Hi, sorry, I just wanted to ask Dr. Neil, because I work for the NHS as well and I'm in the same situation. I'm facing dismissal because of an allergic reaction to the masks and I ended up in A&E. And my question to you is, we are trying to chase, and I know other colleagues, trying to chase GPs to sign an exemption form, and we are coming to them with concerns about our health, and they're just shutting us down because they have a list from God knows where that states they can only do an exemption form under these circumstances, and if you don't have any of these, they won't sign anything. So I was just wondering, you were talking about chasing that exemption so we could work or could continue in our lives. And my question is, do workers for England actually help on that aspect? Because it's hard to find support in this and to navigate with it.
Well, I worked in healthcare all of my career, so this may seem slightly surprising advice to give. If you want an exemption, no job mandate, don't go anywhere near your GP.
Right. That's right.
And I'll explain why. Many of the members that I've been representing have got obvious health concerns, conditions that would make them, contraindications, history of cardiovascular disease, for example. Planning to have a baby is another one. And they've gone to their GP. Those that have actually managed to get an appointment, which is not easy these days, is it? Those that have actually managed to talk to the GP, this is, I can probably say 3 or 4 dozen cases of this, just in the people I'm representing. I've had a conversation with the GP, and the GP has said, I agree with you, you shouldn't, but I'm not going to put it in writing. I'm not going to give you an exemption. This is the extent of the corruption of the medical profession here in 2021. These doctors, like any professionals, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a medic, they pride themselves, professionals, on their esoteric independence, right? They don't just do what they're told to do, right? If they wanted to give you an exemption, they could. But such is a genuine, and I'm not standing up for that, I think it's inexcusable what GPs are doing in this situation. But a little bit of understanding is that the professional bodies, and it's the same in nursing, have made it very clear that any doctor that steps out of line will be in trouble. And for the same reason, very few doctors are filling in yellow card reports for adverse reactions. So my practical answer to your question would be spread the word. Do not take the intuitive step of going to see your GP. Join the Workers of England.
Yes.
We'll get your exemption for you.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll go to Ram.
Yep, absolutely. Ram, go ahead.
Hi there. My main question is, you spoke about we're winning the battle. How do we win the war? When we hold these people to account, when we get them up in front of a jury or whatever. Right. So, lots of people have died now. Kids are starting to die. Like, how many more people got to die before people go to account?
Thank you. I totally agree with you. You know, what is the ultimate answer? Because unless we can convene courts tomorrow that we can trust with grand juries in and haul these people in front of us, how do we get there? Right? So this is one of the things, because, you know, the lawful process is that you as a member of society, if you identify somebody in society who is killing others, you know, typically you go along, you either have the police there or you yourself effect a lawful arrest. But the problem is, where do you then take that person to be detained and charged if the police won't detain them and charge them? And this is where we're at. So if anyone has a magical answer, I'm all ears. But, you know, this is absolutely brilliant, genius way of stalling the democratic process, is for the police just to absolutely stonewall everyone, which is what's happening.
Aren't you allowed to commit a crime if it prevents a greater crime?
Well, that's for ultimately the courts to decide, and you're taking a risk clearly, because of course the obvious thing is you effect a lawful arrest, and then the police say that you've kidnapped, falsely imprisoned, etc., and then you've got a bun fight on your hands. So, you know, the issue is that the word on the ground from an awful lot of people is that they are this close to becoming violent. And that's my concern. And when I met with Sir Graham Brady, I did say to him, you know, we are looking at potentially civil war.
I'm not being funny, but I'll die on my feet before I live on my knees.
Well, you know, increasing numbers of people are saying that, and clearly not just here, but abroad as well. You know, but frankly, civil war, nobody wants it really, do they, frankly? So how do we get from being, you know, holding on to our democratic lawful process while stopping crimes against humanity, war crimes and genocide, and not go to civil war? And, you know, we're here trying and trying and trying. I haven't got the answer. Sorry. What I will, you know, what we all know is that there are people preparing for war. You know, it's come out from other countries. They are, you know, various people are preparing for war. And, you know, when I've spoken to my military network, and to be honest, got freaked out, you know, last time we had a civil war, 1 in 10 people were killed. Don't want to lose my fellow brothers and sisters. But, you know, the word back from people is, well, none of us are in control of everybody, right? So people are going to take matters into their own hands, and history tells us that. And that's why it's so important to have a democratic process, so that we don't have to resort to violence. And indeed it says that in the preamble of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It says, whereas if men are not to resort to barbarous acts.
But it's failed, the democratic process is failing.
I agree.
Sorry, but the controllers want us to go to war. Then we've got to be non-violent resistance.
Yeah.
We just have to be. They want chaos and destruction. They're not creating it now. They feed off it all. The controllers, whoever you mentioned it earlier, like whoever they are, okay, behind Soros and all those people, they want war. And we have to stop war.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We're in a situation where war is being conducted on the civilian population, by definition, under the war conventions. Okay, so it's not an opinion. Unlawful acts of war are being committed on the civilian population. So arguably, are we already in a war? Well, most people say we're already in a war. So what we're talking about are levels of violence then. And, you know, who wants violence? Nobody, frankly. Nobody wants violence. But I agree. Where are we with it all?
Sorry, can I recommend Jean Sharp's book, From Dictatorship to Democracy, and also Non-Violent Resistance, 198 Methods of Non-Violent Resistance. Everybody should read it, please.
Absolutely. Well, sorry, I'll just comment on that. The Serbian revolution, they use that as their blueprint for the Serbian revolution, and Extinction Rebellion are using it too. They say that so because the Serbian revolutionists set up these consultancies where they've been advising other countries about how to conduct a revolution, and you're absolutely right, Jean Sharp, From Dictatorship to absolutely spot on.
Right, next question. Let's go to the back.
Yeah,
gentlemen.
I was able to stop my 13-year-old son at school and in the catch-up. His mother can now take him to a clinic with her signature. How can is there any way I can block that? I tried my GP, so apparently there's two systems of your information, and the use one. Is there any way I can have it so it comes up that I don't consent to this?
Oh, well, sorry, did I understand? So it's you and your other half and one of your consents? Oh, okay.
I don't talk to my son either.
Oh, I'm so sorry, that's it. Yeah.
But I just need, she can spike me.
I'm afraid that's happening across the land, unfortunately. But basically, the Children's Act, 1989, sets out very clearly that as a parent you have the right, duty and responsibilities, etc., of a parent in respect of your child. You do have to give your parental consent. This whole idea that they're saying parental consent is not required is not the law. And I refer you again to that Medicines for Human Use Clinical Trials Regulations 2004. It specifically says that the parent's consent must be obtained. So you are one of the parents, right? So the other parent cannot override on something like this legally. Well, have you written to the school already?
The school's done now, that's done and dusted.
They have buses outside schools.
Oh, I see, okay, they're on the
buses. It's not been
buses.
done in the school, but and the catch-up thing is for the kids that weren't. But they can use Gillick in, and I phone up virtually every day, making out, and then I say, oh well, maybe his mother's already done it. So, and just, at the moment, he's not been done.
How old is he then?
13.
13. And the's no way that you can actually contact him and say, absolutely not, I do not give you my consent.
I've just come off police bail actually. I was arrested, she had me arrested and harassment. And all I've done is ask questions about my son. And the solicitor said, this is ridiculous, she's choosing to ignore you. So the whole thing is, but I can bribe them quite easily, £1,000 would do anything. But I can't actually get to make him that offer. But it's awful. It's really awful.
It is awful, and they can't use Gillick competence because that case of Bell and Tavistock that was decided at the end of last year specifically dealt with a situation where it was an experimental treatment, which, although that case was about puberty blockers, and the point the court was making was that children cannot understand the fact that there aren't long-term consequences. They can't understand what it might mean not to be fertile and not be able to have a child. They might think at 13 or 14, oh, I never want to get married, I don't want to have children, this is fine. 10 years later they do. So for all those reasons, the court was saying, it has to be parental consent. A child cannot be deemed Gillick competent when it's experimental, when it's no long-term safety data, when there are risks, serious risks, long-term risks. That was overturned slightly in that Bell and Tavistock, they said you had to apply to the court. It was in the appeal, they said, well, actually it's unrealistic to go to the court all the time, but you should be getting full parental consent with the GP, with the parents.
So will I go through my GP? Because my GP is not interested. They just passed me from one.
Who is your son's registered GP?
It's at Saxonbury House in Crowborough.
Right, well the registered GP, you can write to them and say, I do not give my consent. And as the GP is responsible ultimately for your child, because if they delegate that responsibility, they're still the overall responsible person. So yes, I would write to the GP.
That they do not have access to his medical records. But I said, well, how do they know he's not got any medical
Well,
records?
absolutely. Yeah, so how do they conduct an individual risk assessment on your son with his medical records if they can't access the medical records?
You can't think of any way that where I go from here to, who do I write to? Do I write to anyone? Or?
Well, I'd write to your GP.
I think that's a very interesting subject you've raised. Thank you so much for opening up on it. We need to take we've got time for one more question. Because we have to clear up the hall, get the tables and chairs away, so let's make it a good one. Who's got the best question? Young man, please, go ahead. Oh, we'll just get, I've got a mic. Yeah, can you speak loudly?
I'll try, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, as a young man with quite a young family, we've been talking on this subject at home with my wife, and I think like many, quite overwhelmed with everything that's going on. My question, I've got several questions. People have said, who is behind this? What is the motive? Why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? Would you say that they say that the devil leadeth the temptation, right? And that the devil here is something that's nothing new. That actually the devil here is money, capitalism, the fractional reserve system. And GPs, pharmaceutical companies, entire healthcare systems, our politicians, first past post system, the way people are elected, relying on donations. Money is power. And money also enables people with power to also control the information flow. So I often discuss with my partner at home, what can we do? What can we do? We can resist, we watched a movie recently about Gandhi, and it gave us gave me a lot of hope that actually, we were talking earlier here about non-violence, and how powerful that was, that actually just, non-violent act from a single man was able to defeat the entire British Empire. But that was then, right? That was back in 1948, right? But I believe today, where I'm from, originally India, we talked about civil war, right? So we have that in India ever since, because it's divide and rule. And I see so many parallels between what happened then with the Hindus and Muslims, what is happening today with the Hindus and Muslims today. So those people who are part of the system, who, like myself, have been vaccinated all my life, for going to India, polio, what have you, I've had all the vaccines. How can we come together in a meaningful way when money still controls everything? I mean, these are real problems that real people are facing. We can say no to a point, but we can't say no if we're now not left, who's got anything left to eat. We can't earn money because we've lost our jobs, or we can't do business with people because that's what everybody else is. So how can we come together and move forward and make a real change long term, where actually the incentive system worldwide is changed? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I'm not in any way minimising your views about the money and power, but the best things in life are free. Many of us here, and I'm sure there's many of you in the audience tonight who have been involved in local, national even, campaigns whether you're full-blown activists, or whether you're just people that go to local groups, you will know the spiritual high you get from being with people who share your values. Because your values are the right values. Values don't cost anything. Yeah? And it's the people who are doing this to us, who've talked all the time about their narrative and their values. They don't really have human values. They're trying to dehumanize us.
Yeah.
But they're the ones who are lacking in humanity. And always remember that. They can't take your humanity away.
You're absolutely right? Starve people out and they'll comply to anything. So I appreciate money is a serious consideration in it. On the upside, of course, people losing jobs means that there'll be vacancies and, people will be shifting around doing different jobs. That's obviously a hope. In terms of care workers and healthcare workers, there are new organisations being set up to allow, for example, getting cottage hospitals going again in the community. There are practical issues with that. Oh, by the way, I'm on the steering committee of the World Council for Health, and that's one of the things we're looking into is setting up alternative healthcare systems. We've got a stumbling block in terms of personal indemnity insurance, but those things are happening. But of course, bartering, right? We'll be going back to doing things for each other without charging each other to do things for each other. So take the money out of the equation. That's also incredible. But in terms of what you were saying about the best things for free, all of us lawyers and experts that have been working together for the past year to help each other understand all of this, we've all been doing it for nothing. Now, I can't run a litigation case normally without paying an expert £300, £400, £500, £600 for an hour and a half's work, where we just get the key points, and if I've got any further questions, unless my client can pay for those questions, we don't get the answers. We are getting experts from all over the world. Geert van der Bosch, the world's #1 expert, was on a Zoom call with us all last week for 2 hours, giving us his latest evidence, for free. All of us are doing it for free, right? So there is that absolute beauty that when you take the devil, the money, out of it, amazing things can happen. And I'm a great believer that, that's what we will do. We will invent new systems, we will get by, we will help each other, we will support those who are falling out on their hard, luck, and we will get through it. I'm a great believer in that. This is a spiritual war.
Yes.
This is a spiritual war. I love you all for coming, so I really do. I really genuinely mean that. I'm here because I do care about humanity, and together we will win this. So have hope, please, everybody.
It only leaves me to say thank you again for coming on tonight. Fantastic turnout. I'm so pleased with you all. And just want to say, obviously, a big thank you to our panel of guest speakers at the table.
Can you share how people can go back and watch this, please?
Yeah, sure. We have a website, midsussexassembly.org. There'll be a link on there. Okay, thank you. Good question. And just final thing to say is if you want to get involved and help us with local activities, please do so. Again, you can find us through the website, midsussexassembly.org. Come and join us, it's free. We get a lot done. Thank you very much, all. Goodbye.